Hello, Gremlins! A few weeks ago, I drew a reference sheet for my artist-sona, Green, who is basically a fantasy version of me, and I mentioned that I now want to create fantasy sonas for the friends I keep mentioning on the channel, the bearded gremlin and Garnet the gremlin. Well, now I'm on a break from my classes, bored, and with a lot of time on my hands, so now seems as good a time as any for some shenanigans. One at a time, I'm going to ask my friends a bunch of questions about character designs they want, and create Green's friends. The bearded gremlin got his name on the channel first, so I'm designing his character first. This is mostly because the morning I decided to start this project, he was already online, texting me about insects and helping me work on a video that, at this point, I uploaded a few weeks ago. My first step was asking the bearded gremlin what fantasy race he wanted to be, and he chose Firbolg, based on the D&D race of giant kin who often live in the Feywild. Every other detail of his persona, the bearded gremlin left up to me. Before starting the proper design, I did a quick sketch with color added to make sure the bearded gremlin was happy with his depiction. When I finished the actual sketch, I did a little tweaking to change the pose to a wave, rather than a generic character model. The bearded gremlin's Firbolg features are his wide nose, pointed ears, and fur on his arms. Everything else just looks like he does in real life, and while these clothes aren't based on an actual outfit he wears, it is all clothes that he would wear, and I think I actually inspired the bearded gremlin to get a t-shirt like this. The bearded gremlin is wearing a grey t-shirt with white outlined insects as a graphic. These insects include a stag beetle, a millipede, a dragonfly, and a grasshopper, although some are partially covered by his vest. That vest is covered in enamel pins, something that the bearded gremlin collects in real life. These pins aren't based on actual pins in his collection, but they are based on his interests: D&D, space, insects, marine animals, and animals in general. Finally, the bearded gremlin has cuffed jeans and sneakers. I didn't intend to give each character a color palette, but it happened anyway. Obviously, my color palette is green. The bearded gremlin's is blue, and Garnet the gremlin, who I draw next, is red. A lot of the bearded gremlin's outfit is grey, but the blue appears in his jeans and in the general color palette of all the pins on his vest. I'm keeping the personality of the bearded gremlin's fantasy persona very similar to his actual personality, meaning that he's a nerd, very caring, knows a ridiculous number of fun facts about any topic imaginable, and always one-ups me when I'm trying to annoy him. As this is a short bonus video, I didn't add any shading to either character, so I finished this drawing by changing the plain white background to a soft beige and adding the bearded gremlin's name, pronouns, and species to the corner. Next, I got started with Garnet the gremlin's fantasy persona, which again I planned off camera on a call with Garnet, sketched for her approval, then began to work on the final drawing later in the day after Garnet had disappeared to go to sleep. It was a little trickier to pin down Garnet's fantasy design. She knew that she wanted wings, but wasn't sure beyond that, and she's less embedded in high fantasy spaces, so together we spent a while going through lists of D&D races and fantasy species to figure out which winged creatures Garnet felt like being. Eventually, she decided she'd be a fae, not a tiny fairy, but in a similar vein, which does mean all three of us are fae creature-based, which feels fitting. In order to differentiate between the two of us, both winged creatures, Garnet's wings are inspired by a beetle's wings, rather than a cicada like my design is based on. She also doesn't have pointed ears like the bearded gremlin and I do. Finally, Garnet asked if she could have a bird companion, which I am just now realizing I completely forgot to give her in the drawing. The bird is a bee-eater, specifically a cinnamon-chested bee-eater, which looks like this. If I draw Garnet in the future in various scenarios, I will give her her well-deserved bird, don't worry. Garnet was more specific with her outfit than the bearded gremlin was, and asked for a flowy tiered skirt and peasant blouse, then changed her design so the two elements were connected into a dress. The dress is a dark, jewel-toned red, and I added extra detail by adding flowers and plants around the hem, and vines around the neckline and sleeves. I'm sure I'll end up regretting those details if I end up repeatedly drawing Garnet, but they look really cool, so it will be worth the time. Garnet's real-life color palette is deep and autumnal, so I kept to a color palette of yellows, greens, and oranges for the foliage designs, which also work really well with her dark red skirt. Garnet's other features, like her hair and skin, are based on her real-life look, although her hair in the drawing is longer than it physically is right now. The pose is also based on Garnet's go-to photo pose, which is fun to draw. Originally, I was going to have both her arms outstretched, but instead decided that one hand would be flourishing her skirt. Like the bearded gremlin, Garnet's fantasy persona personality is based off her real one, so she's also a nerd, loves to read, is introverted but very talkative with people she's comfortable with, is passionate about science and math, specifically medical science, is a pacifist, and cares deeply about her family and friends. After sending the finished drawing to Garnet, she requested a couple small changes, and then the drawing was complete, and both my closest friends have fantasy personas to hang out with mine. When I thought of the idea to make this video, I thought I'd do one more drawing at the end of the three of us all hanging out together to show how we'd act, as well as the height differences between us. My sona is quite short, the bearded gremlin's is very tall, and Garnet's is close to her real height, which is, as she has told me many times, the average height for an American woman. However, I ended up starting like 4 or 5 other creative projects while working on this one, so I'm just posting the character designs, and if I get hit with inspiration again, I might make more art of the three of us in the future. Thank you for watching this surprise bonus video, and stay tuned for regular content soon. Thank you especially to Garnet the gremlin and to the bearded gremlin for being very involved in the creation of this video, and for being amazing friends. I love you both. Until next time, bye!